Thank you for listening to the Following Films podcast. Today I'm joined by Doug Mirell. Since October 2023, Doug has strategized with the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists about getting as many stakeholders as possible to agree upon acceptable final language for the No Fakes Act. That's bipartisan legislation that was formally introduced into the U.S. Senate on July 31st, 2024. Included within the coalition of frequently adversarial organizations that have endorsed the No Fakes Act are the Recording Industry Association of America, the Motion Picture Association, OpenAI, IBM, Creative Artists Agency, and William Morris Endeavor, along with SAG-AFTRA. The No Fakes Act seeks to prevent individuals and companies, including social media sites and other platforms, from producing or distributing unauthorized digital replicas embodying the voices and/or visual likenesses of living or deceased humans. I had a great time chatting with Doug, and I found this conversation to be really enlightening, especially for a layman like me. He helped to put a lot of this in perspective, so definitely give this one a listen, and hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. Hey, Doug, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm happy to try to help. So hopefully I will be somewhat useful to you. Let's see.
Well, absolutely. Well, this is something that I'm actually deeply interested in. Just with how AI, it's one of those things that's kind of touching on everybody right now. Beyond just the entertainment industry, it's something that pretty much anybody that's collecting a paycheck is concerned about how this could be impacting their lives. So I think this is definitely a relevant conversation to everyone right now.
Indeed. Let me ask you,
Yeah.
do you want me to have this background on, or do you want me to blur?
I only use the audio, so you're fine.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I just go on video so that I can get visual cues from the person I'm talking to. That's it.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it makes the conversation a little bit more personal than just a phone call.
No,
So,
that's great.
Could you talk a little bit about No Fakes? What is that, and how did you get involved in it?
So I guess really the genesis is through the representation of various A-list performers that we represent who have, and this primarily applies to female performers, they are the subject of frequently pornographic deep fakes that are incredibly difficult to remove from the internet because the platforms that host them either do not listen when complaints are made, or they deem themselves free of any liability because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And so, that was an initial entree into the subject. And then for a number of years, I've represented SAG-AFTRA in various matters. And obviously, as a result of the strikes last year and everything else that has been occurring, it's clear that that issue has become topmost on the agenda of performers more generally.
Well, I think it's for anybody, it goes beyond that. It should be, the two of us right now that we're speaking, and there's going to be a model that could be made of both of our voices, or anybody that's doing that, that you can really just start forging somebody, from not only just a physical, but you could make it sound like this person was calling you. It's just a really pretty big problem that we're having. So what is, from those negotiations that happened last year, what are they looking to get in contracts going forward?
So, as someone who wasn't directly involved in the collective bargaining aspects of this, what was clear, though, from those conversations, is that this does need to extend beyond signator companies and SAG-AFTRA members, and apply more generally.
Yeah.
Beyond the No Fakes Act, to give you for instance, I've testified on 3 occasions in Sacramento just this year on a bill that seeks to protect deceased performers exclusively from being subjected to AI manipulations. And that obviously is something that, though it was touched on in the collective bargaining negotiations, really didn't have full flower. And so what we're trying to do in Sacramento is to ensure that all deceased performers have those rights. And again, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be a deceased performer. Indeed, you don't have to have had any commercial value in your name or likeness or voice to receive protection. So, that's part of what's going on. And then on the federal side, the goal was to extend this beyond those who are regular performers and include those who are regular people and without requiring any sort of commercial exploitation during lifetimes for deceased performers, and also ensuring specific protection for minors, which is something that isn't explicitly included in a lot of legislation that's being considered.
I hadn't even thought about that. So with deceased performers, is that something where the estate has the ability to negotiate with that and sell that likeness in the same way that that you could use somebody's likeness years after they've passed and the estate could continue to do that with AI imagery? Or is that something that they're trying to, in their lifetime, they have to sign off on that, the actual individual?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that, well, let's talk about the No Fakes Act.
Sure. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine. What we've got is a situation where if you are a deceased performer, you are precluded from licensing your image or voice. I misspoke. You're precluded from assigning your image or voice. You can license it to others, but you can't essentially give it away in gross, in total. And so that's felt to be a protection, and this was one of actually the more controversial provisions of the bill. That was felt to be necessary in order to ensure that sort of the unequal bargaining power that might exist between performers and those who wish to exploit them might, sort of sneak in. Well, you're giving us this right, not just for this project, but forever.
Right.
And so that was a provision that exists now in the No Fakes Act. But licensing is permissible, and with respect to the dead, there is an initial 10-year window from the date of death during which protection exists. And then after that 10 years, if there's 2 years during which commercial exploitation occurs, then you can get an additional 5-year extension, essentially. And that can occur over and over again up until 70 years, which is the length of time, for example, that in California is the length of the postmortem right of publicity that applies typically in commercial exploitations. But that, also is one of the most important, I would say, aspects of No Fakes, is that it isn't a prohibition upon commercial exploitation of your AI image. It's any exploitation, including in all kinds of expressive works. And that's then where the First Amendment kicks in and where there are exclusions and necessary protections that exist. But that's a key part of this law.
That's right. So could you drill down on just one piece of this, that something that I heard about, and that I was just curious if you could maybe help a layman like myself understand a little bit, where there was some talk about how people that were, background players and, actors that are just doing, day work, and they just show up as an extra, and that they were signing contracts that image that they had generated, that they use from that film, that they can just use that over and over again. So you do one day as an extra in a film, they could essentially build out your model and then just reuse that in films in perpetuity. Was that the case, or is that something that's been answered for at this point?
Well, with respect to the contract negotiations, and again, I'm not the expert.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
But there was, yes, that was a sticking point. But I believe the way that it was ultimately resolved is that day players essentially would have to get paid a day play work
Okay.
for the use. And there are certain carve-outs for sequels and projects that are related to the underlying work. But if it's a totally new work for which, for example, motion capture,
Sure.
got the image embedded, that can't be used under the SAG-AFTRA agreement without going back and compensating for it.
So when you're in law school, you could not have imagined this is what your future would be. How did you end up here in this particular field and then in this particular cause?
Well, so I went to law school when dinosaurs roamed the earth. So we were concerned about, Tyrannosaurus,
Sure.
Stegosaurus.
Slightly different media landscape at that point.
Yeah. Well, actually, there is sort of an indirect route here because a lot of the concern about this issue stems from something called the right of publicity. And I have been involved in right of publicity issues for a good 3 decades or so. And I've represented, for example, the estate of Marilyn Monroe, and went to the legislature in California, got them to clarify that the law applied to people who died before the law was enacted in 1985. I've been dealing with other cases in which I represented the Franklin Mint that got sued by the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund because of products that it was producing immediately after her untimely death. And so, this is a sandbox that I've been familiar with for quite some time. And it was felt that, in many ways, AI is a kind of offshoot of that a body of law. And the problem and the reason why that body of law doesn't assist is because it's largely, as I said, confined to commercial exploitations, products, goods, services, advertising for those.
Sure.
And there is case law out there that says, well, if it's not the exact image that you're talking about or the exact voice that you're talking about, then we're not going to protect you. And so that's where the notion of deep fakes comes in with the emphasis on the fake.
Right.
It's not the body of Gal Gadot that's performing this sex act. It's her face superimposed on the body of a porn star.
Right.
And so that body of law really was found wanting. It was deficient in terms of its ability to protect performers in that way. And so now, generative AI creates a whole new series of related issues, but ones that are much more intractable than even the deep fakes that we were dealing with, like half a decade ago.
Well, it's getting more and more difficult to suss these things out. And then really anybody with a keyboard can generate these. You don't have to have any special skills to do this. You and I could start creating you could say James Dean with the mustache, and you altered it enough that you can just throw him in a film that he never signed off on at this point because it's not direct commercial and it's something that's in parody. I mean, can you get away with that at this point?
So, what's interesting is that the studios that have been producing movies where AI has been employed have all been pretty careful about getting permission from the people who they have exploited. So, for example, Oliver Reed in Gladiator,
right?
Paul Walker in the Fast and Furious series, Carrie Fisher in Star Wars, and James Dean, in fact, have all been. They've gone to the representatives, the estates of all of those folks, and obtained their permission. We have a client, Tom Hanks, who is currently, in a film that's about to be released where he's going to be de-aged, and that was obviously done with with his consent and his permission. And he actually is an advocate for appropriate use of AI. So, look, I mean, performers now will be able to have their careers extended many years if they wish. But hopefully, too, these kinds of laws will protect people like Robin Williams, who, in his will, decided and directed that he not be exploited after his death. He didn't want anybody, using his voice or likeness in any way. And so, it really is a regime that provides for those who wish to exploit themselves in this way, as well as for those who wish to preclude their exploitation.
And protection and having that sort of having your voice be heard in that, I think, is the most important part of it. And just being able to have a choice with your likeness and your career and those things that you built up. But it's like you were saying, it's not just these famous ones that we know about. It's the ones that would slip under the cracks that really concern me, the non-Tom Hanks of the world, because you can't slip Tom Hanks into a movie without somebody calling foul. But, if somebody that maybe had a face that looked appropriate for it, and what can they do with that and those kinds of things? I think that's where it gets a little bit murky for people and a little bit scary. And then, not to say the whole idea of what you're talking about with, Gal Gadot and these pornographic images that end up on the web, and what happens with, high school students that this happens to, and to, people that are just normal civilians, that somebody took an image from Facebook or wherever and just generated, pornography from it. It's just, I don't even know how to get my head around that, what to do with that. It just makes you, as a dad, of teenagers, thinking, you don't put anything out there of yourself in any way at all. It almost feels like, but that cat's already out of the bag. It's just, I don't know how you combat it at this point.
Well, on that last point, I love to invoke Lady Gaga, who
as we all do.
And even when she's not in Paris. I invoke her for what she said about social media, which is that it is the toilet of the internet. That is no more or less true today than it has ever been. And so, yeah, look, it is a serious problem, and the pornographic deepfake issue is being dealt with, both on the state level and on the federal level. There's a legislation that's made it out of the Senate called the Defiance Act, which seeks to finally put some teeth in federal prohibitions against deepfake porn. And so, that's something that I hope will actually make it through Congress. I despair of anything actually ever making it through Congress. But with respect to Defiance Act, I think that's on a somewhat fast track. And I'm hopeful, frankly, that No Fakes is also heading there, along with legislation to deal with AI manipulations that might result in election interference.
That's a huge one also.
We don't have much time left, but there are state statutes. California, 3 or 4 years ago, passed a bill that kicks in 60 days before the election, and has some significant penalties attached to it. But we're not quite there yet, and we've already seen, on both sides of the fence, that there have been AI manipulations, and as of yesterday, claimed falsely an AI manipulation of a photograph of Kamala Harris arriving.
I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to actually, that was what was jumping in the back of my mind when you said that. So you said, I haven't heard this was falsely claimed at this point.
By Trump.
By Trump. Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah.
So, in a sense that, and that's another problem too, because the existence of generative AI is something that, can now be used as a sword by people who wish to try to convince others that, don't believe your eyes, right? And so, so both creators and those who falsely claim the creation are equally liable to create mischief in the world.
It's yeah, the idea of you can't even trust what you're seeing. There's been the can't always trust what you read, but literally seeing a videotape that always felt like that. Yeah, that's the damning evidence right there. You've seen it. You watched them walk across the hallway, and then they spoke, and that's his voice, and that's certainly his gate. So yeah, they're guilty, that kind of thing. And you just that beyond even elections, the downstream effects of this and how this could this is huge. Something that I'm glad that this is something that, for the most part, seems like you get people that are really divergent in politics that don't agree on much. They do agree on this, though, that that we need to lock this down. So it seems like you have pretty bipartisan support for this kind of legislation.
Yeah, no, that is actually probably the most encouraging thing about this, that, no matter which side of the ledger you fall, that people's oxes are being gored all over the place. And so no fakes in particular, when it was introduced in the U.S. Senate on July 31st, was introduced by 4 senators. You had Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, Chris Coons from Delaware, 2 Democrats.
Yeah.
And then you had Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee and Tom Tillis from North Carolina, who were the Republicans who introduced it. And, even people like, as diverse as Ted Cruz and Adam Schiff, have all sort of decried in one way or another the existence of these, AI-generated fakes.
I'm not sure you could get Ted Cruz and Adam Schiff to agree that we breathe oxygen, so that you can get them to agree on this is pretty remarkable.
No, that's quite true. Quite true.
So then, what are the next steps right now? What can people do to support this, or how can we help this? Or is there, where should we be watching for more information about this?
Yeah, so as I say, I mean, we're basically 2 weeks into the life of the bill, which has been gestating since October of 2023. And that's when the first discussion draft was put out to the world. And so people have commented on this, and all of the stakeholders on all different sides have, finally come together to support this. And so I guess I would say at this point, we are in the early stages, and if I had to guess, I would say it's not entirely likely that this bill is going to get out of Congress before the end of this legislative term. But what I would say is I would encourage your listeners to reach out to any one or more of those 4 authors. Chris Coons is the principal author on the bill from Delaware, but Klobuchar, Blackburn, and Tillis are all people who should be congratulated for having taken the step of getting this bill introduced. And to the extent they are not senators from the states in which your listeners live, they should encourage their own home state senators to join them as co-sponsors of the legislation. And then, we can talk about what ought to be done on the House side if things get moving there. Although there, as I mentioned earlier, if people are concerned about deepfake porn, the Defiance Act has now moved over to the House side and may well get a vote before the end of this term. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that and support it.
Who's gonna be opposed to this legislation?
Oh, well, one of the difficulties historically in dealing with this area of the law is the recalcitrance, which is really almost a euphemism for the platforms that host this stuff. Because of the existence of this crazy law that was passed at the birth of the internet, Section 230,
Yep.
Platforms have immunity for posting user-generated content. And so, one can complain all one wants to. One can one can flag content and send messages to the platforms saying, "Hey, this is a violation of your own community guidelines or your terms of service." And unfortunately, more often than not, those platforms will simply say, "Pound sand," effectively. We don't have to care. We're like the old Emily Latella routine from Laugh-In. That's how old I am. When Lily Tomlin used to say, "You're the phone company. We don't have to care." That's what many of these platforms do. They talk a good game, but they then do not follow up by enforcing their own terms of service. And so, so that's a big problem. And fortunately, No Fakes takes care of that problem by creating a notice and takedown provision that's similar to what exists in copyright law. And the trade-off, the quid pro quo for that, is that they will then no longer have that immunity under Section 230. And so if they get appropriate notice and they fail to act upon it, they will then become liable for the violation, just as the person who created the content in the first place would be.
So it's essentially like a cease and desist order, but just remove the content from your site that is being questioned at that point.
Right, so. And it has a counter notice provision. You can try to say, well, there's an exception for it here, and this is permissible, but then the platform is at its risk if it ultimately decides that it doesn't wish to take down the content. And so the hope is, and the expectation, and this seems to be borne out by how the copyright takedown regime has worked, is that they will, in fact, in a close case, take it down in order to avoid potential liability.
Yeah, I mean, is the image worth fighting over? That if somebody's putting up a fight at that point, it's probably easier to remove than it is to argue about it, depending on what that thing is. So, and if you're generating money off of, I think it seems like a good plan going forward. I guess the pushback would be they don't feel like doing it. They don't want to spend the money to create the infrastructure to get rid of it, or they don't want to hurt their traffic. None of them are good reasons not to do it, to not exploit people. So, yeah. And they seem like they're doing okay as far as.
You think? Yeah.
I think they're doing all right. So I don't think
I don't stay up late at night worrying about how much money Google isn't making.
No, yeah. When I hear that their stock tanked and they're only worth like how many are X billions of dollars at this point because everything went to shit over the weekend, I'm not that worried about it either. So, but Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, man. I really appreciate it. And thank you for putting up with my layman's questions on the subject. This is really helpful.
Not at all. Very happy to help out, and hope your listeners stay tuned to developments as they happen, and keep looking both at the state level and the federal level, because things are happening all over the place.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one that we don't want to let slip through the cracks, because some of those genies are hard to get back in the bottle once they're unleashed. So we gotta tamp this one down sooner than later.
Whether portrayed by Robin Williams or not. So,
See, look at you. You're good at this, man. Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Great to meet you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Years gone, and what do we have to show? Wasted time that I know, and fear's gone, and where did all of it go? And my pride and my mind follows my pride. So what's wrong with fixing and plastering though? Oh, nothing, not anymore. So sing your victory song.